Hey there, everybody, and welcome to the Creating Healthy Boundaries for the Holidays workshop. I'm so excited to be here with you guys today and to share this incredible opportunity to come together to talk about how we can use our boundaries to have a better holiday experience, one that's filled with more joy and more peace and less guilt, shame, overwhelm, stress, all the things that are typically things that we experience during this holiday season, and what I hear from a lot of women all the time when it comes to the holidays. So, my name is Shelby John, and I am a woman in long term recovery as well as a coach for sober women who want to pursue emotional sobriety. Really, what that means is to have fulfilling relationships, to take control of their physical health, and pursue the dreams of their heart beyond recovery. There's so much more to our lives than just getting sober. That's truly just the beginning, scratching the surface. And then when we start to dig into these other skills and really our passions and our desires, we get into more of these emotional sobriety opportunities. And that's basically my favorite place to meet sober women is right along that path where you've been sober for a little while and you're ready for a little more. Or maybe you've been sober for many, many years and you've experienced what I call sober bottom. I talk a lot about that in my story. The first time that happened to me was in year 4, and it was pretty significant. So why is this important and what are we going to do tonight? And why should you pay attention, really? Because so many people during this time of year, particularly those of us in recovery, struggle with overwhelm, with stress, with just guilt and shame, a lot of grief and sadness. There's just a lot of feelings at this time. And there's a lot of expectations from others. There's just it's very difficult for a lot of us to have true peace and joy, which is really what we keep hearing this season is all about, right? A lot of times it's the exact opposite of that. And so what I want to do is talk about how we can start to put in place some strategies that are really going to help you to have the kind of holiday experience that you want to have, how you want to spend your time and your money and your energy, right? Not only how other people want to do that. And this is an important distinction, right? So this is basically what happens. A lot of times people or things or opportunities can really hijack our lives. And it happens sometimes very subtly, sometimes it's extremely obvious, and neither way makes it any better, right? It still leaves us kind of feeling like, oh my gosh, why did I say I would do that? Or every year this comes up and I always say I'm never going to do that again, and here I am doing it again. So if we can just establish how to put into place some of these healthy boundaries for the holiday season early on, as soon as you can, to help you like manage this time between now and the new year, I think we'll all be in a much healthier, happier place. And then as you learn how to do this and you kind of grasp onto what I'm saying, you just put these things into place in the rest of your life too. And then you can use them next year during holiday season. You can use them all year long. And by the way, that's exactly what I did for you guys in the Creating Healthy Boundaries mini course that is available to you at any time. You can just jump in there. It's a self-guided opportunity where I really break down the main areas of our lives where we need these kinds of boundaries and then what it looks like to put those into place. So I'll throw the link out there for you guys. If you're interested in that, you can check it out. All right. So really important is I want you guys to know that knowledge is power. That's a phrase that we hear a lot. And understanding is self-awareness, right? So when we begin to understand not only ourselves, but other people as well, that is the development of self-awareness. And when we do that, it really builds the confidence that I'm talking about. It builds esteem. It builds trust in ourselves and this resilience that we need to kind of get up every day and do all the things, right? So learning how to create healthy boundaries, especially during this time of year, helps to reduce your stress level, your overwhelm, and it helps to increase and build that self-esteem and confidence. Because when you do this work, you're more in tune with how you're feeling, and you're more in tune with what you want. And it's not a bad thing. It's not selfish or disrespectful. It's actually quite the opposite when we do this. We're really honoring and respecting ourselves when we do this enough to say, I am important to me, and what I want is important, as well as what other people want as well. So when you do this, you become more assertive because you'll be able to ask for people to treat you the way you want to be treated. You want them to meet your needs, right? You'll be able to um, not be resentful of others for or let them take advantage of you, right? It helps you to live more in alignment with your own values. So I'm wondering for you guys, what are some examples of things or areas where you need some boundaries in your life during the holiday season? What are some examples of that? All of us probably have some. You can write them in the chat. You can just write them down on a piece of paper so that you can kind of keep track of it as we're working together tonight, because I'm sure more things will even come up. So what are some areas of your life or some examples where you could use some boundaries in your life during this holiday season right now? So write those down, put them in the chat, however you want to do it. Put them on a piece of paper. I want to stress the importance of starting to do this early in the season, right? So we're already 1 week literally from Thanksgiving. So if ideally we would have probably been doing this last week or even a month ago, but it's never too late, right? So we're early enough for you in the process to still put a lot of these things in place now. And then of course, going forward into the Christmas season, if you celebrate that, you'll already have some of these things at the ready for you to put in place. So the earlier in the process that you can start thinking about what you want and how you're going to put these boundaries in place, the better it is, right? That way you're not like doing it all in the moment, and you can communicate things maybe a little bit more on your terms and in a less sort of emotionally flared or high stress environment, right? Like a family dinner. So the earlier the better. And that way everybody kind of isn't blindsided and you'll be able to feel more comfortable. So what are personal boundaries anyway? What am I even talking about? So boundaries are sometimes people's least favorite thing, right? Because setting boundaries means creating restrictions. Sorry, on my notes here, I'm trying to like prop them up. It means you're creating restrictions in certain areas of your life, right? So a lot of people don't like to do that. They're not a fan. It's important that we create these boundaries because it helps to create a lot of balance in our life. And boundaries are reasonable and safe limits. They really provide some structure to our lives, to our time, to our money, our energy, and it provides some safe limits in our lives. They're helping you to decide what is and what is not acceptable to you. So this is basically you expressing to other people or to the world, this way of being or this way of treating me or this way that I'm going to be is what is acceptable to me, right? So I'm going to show up in this way, and that's what's acceptable to me. And I don't want you to treat me in this particular way because that's not acceptable to me. And your personal boundaries are yours, right? This is a very personal and individual situation because sometimes people, even in our own families, have different ideas about what they want, and they have different personalities, they have different needs, and so they might not be the same as yours. So we have to be sensitive to the fact that these are personal, and when other people have them as well, that means we need to be sensitive to theirs as well. And that's really important, and we're going to get into it a little bit more when we start talking about the actual boundaries that we want to put in place. All right, so how do we actually do this? So healthy boundaries include both physical, emotional, and financial. In that boundaries course that I talked about, I also go into time and around things around work and a little bit more in depth into the financial piece just for your life, not just the holidays. But for our purposes, we're going to kind of touch on that related to the holiday season. And the ones that don't work for us typically include the words never, always, and they use that absolute language, right? Those are the boundaries or the ways of being and communicating with others that are not going to work. They're usually quite unrealistic and they don't last. So very often boundaries are not talked about in relationships. Sometimes people that we're close to or that we work with, they kind of just expect that you know what they are. They just sort of go along life and believe that you know what their needs are and that you're going to hold those boundaries. And that's really unfair because how could you possibly know what everything everybody else always wants, right? That leads to a lot of misunderstandings, miscommunications, and really dysfunction over time in relationships, particularly those that are really important to you, like your family. And this can get, really tricky over holiday time because at holiday time, we're already, sometimes we're already a little bit emotional. Things are already a little bit inflamed just because of the high stress and the overwhelm. So we have to be sensitive a little bit more during this time than we might normally in our regular life. Not that we shouldn't always, but during holiday time, I think it becomes a lot more, right? So we need to be clear about some things what that we want to when we want to set boundaries. So you need to know what you like and what you don't like. Really honing in on that. So if, for example, if you're the kind of person that loves the party, right? You're social, you love the people, you love the energy and the food and the music and the whole thing. You like that. You want to make sure that you tap into that. And you don't like being alone a lot. Maybe that's just something that you don't like. Or maybe you really like staying home and watching movies a lot, and you don't really care for overstimulation, right? What are you comfortable with versus what are you scared of? So in this time of year, are there situations that are going to make you uncomfortable that you know already that because you've done them before or it's come up? What are those things? Are they particular social events? Are they particular places? Just really tap into that and understand what are the things that you're comfortable with versus kind of have a little fear around. How do you want to be treated in certain situations? Really ask yourself those questions. Most people want to be treated with kindness and respect, right? That looks like a variety of things to some people. Like a lot of people are very sensitive to being yelled at, right? Or spoken to in a big voice. That might be something you do not want to tolerate. And so that's going to be an important boundary for you. You have to know these things and really have that self-awareness in order to be able to express them to the other people in your life, right? That's why this is important. That's why I'm asking you to tap into this, because how are you supposed to share with others what you need if you're not even super familiar with that yourself? Because you want to make sure that you're able to also extend grace, right, for the missteps that other people have in these areas, right? Because it's going to happen. It's going to happen. People are going to mess up. They're going to not do what you ask them to do, right? And so we have to be able to be willing to extend grace when it's appropriate. Healthy boundaries create a greater sense of peace and safety in your life, and they give you that emotional and physical freedom, truly, which is such a blessing. And especially for those of us in sobriety, I mean, we lived in the opposite of freedom, I think, for most of our addiction, right? We were not free physically or emotionally. And so to be able to be sober now and live in that way is so different than the way things used to be. And it's so beautiful. And we don't want to allow other people to come in and kind of mess it up, right? We don't want to allow people to emotionally abuse us or manipulate us or come at us with their verbal attacks, right? We want to be able to really embrace life as ourselves without the fear of being disrespected or to being hurt. And it's truly an amazing feeling when you do get there, because it's so opposite of where we came from, right? So emotional boundaries are critical for stress reduction, which I've mentioned, and a truly happy holiday season as much as it can be, right? It's important for us to have these emotional boundaries so that we don't have a lot of tension and dysfunction and anger and fighting, right? But it also means that you're not responsible for other people's feelings. This is something I really want to hone in on. You don't need to allow other people's reactions to dictate your feelings, right? You're not responsible for other people's feelings. You do not need to please other people to the point of harming yourself. That's why we're doing this work. And you do not need to blame other people for your problems. We have to take personal responsibility for ourselves. And when we start pointing the finger back at other people, it really does a number on our own internal peace and serenity eventually, and it gets worse over time. Setting boundaries with your family can be kind of challenging during the holiday season, right? So it's important for you to know which settings for you bring up a not healthy feeling, right? Or bring up difficult emotions for you, or kind of triggering, right? So which people or situations are particularly negative, or they just cause you a lot of stress. Really kind of scan through your holiday season and really pick those things out that are going to be those trigger points for you. So most of us have an experience with a family member that's particularly toxic, right? Or maybe you have a friend. And while you might really love that person, it's not healthy to regularly subject yourself to someone who spews toxic energy. So you want to be really aware of that, and you might need to make different decisions to protect yourself around those kinds of people. This might look like someone who's constantly talking about themselves and their problems, right? And then they try to kind of pull you into it. They're always talking about their problems and they're kind of sucking you in. And man, that can be like an energy drainer really fast. And when you're with them, maybe you never feel like you've been listened to or supported because they're kind of just focused on self. Sometimes they put you down or treat you poorly. These people are often use a lot of manipulation to get what they want, and maybe they're gossiping about other people that you know, and then what are they doing about you? They're probably doing the same thing, right? That energy will definitely affect you before you can even understand that that's happening, because those kind of people or places or situations can be so toxic that it's like it kind of seeps in. Some of it's very subtle. We don't even know that's happening. So if you have a family member or a friend that you know you're going to be around that's toxic, it's time to build some boundaries so that you can either maintain those relationships at a safe distance, or cut them out completely, or just figure out a way to protect your own heart and your own energy when you do have to be around them. Okay. So not only do personal boundaries boost your self-esteem and bolster your sense of identity, they also make life just a lot easier. And that is something, I don't know about you, but we could all use a little of. I'm going to share my screen real quick. I created this cute little slideshow that I'll just share with you, and we'll keep going. Oops. So we talked a little bit already about what personal boundaries are, and I'm hoping you're kind of getting the picture now. They are literally reasonable and safe limits that you place on certain areas and or people of your life. So if you could kind of imagine a fence around a yard, right? The kind that's like the split rail or like the 3-rail fence, not a big barrier wall, like not a brick wall, but they're just fences. So that means they're translucent, right? You can kind of go in and out. You can see through them. You could even climb through it if you wanted, and you can climb back in, but it creates a little bit of a barrier. So a lot of times sometimes people get confused, like when we say we're creating a personal boundary, we're creating like a wall and we're just shutting people or things out. And that might be the case, but I think for most of us, and especially in this situation, it's more likely that it's going to be more like a fence. That's the kind of boundaries that I'm talking about. Less like a brick wall, more like a fence. Okay, so I really want you to consider your ideal holiday season. So what does this mean? I want you to take some time. You can do it as we're talking, but really after we're done, I want you to take some time to sit and just be with yourself for a few minutes. It doesn't have to be long. And ask yourself, what would the ideal holiday season look like for you? How would you spend your time? Who would be there? What about the gifts? How would that be handled? Are there special foods, music, or events? Really get into it. Kind of allow yourself to daydream and your brain to go wherever it takes you. Jot down some notes about what comes up as you're doing this. Now, obviously, you might not be able to have everything on that list, but it's quite possible that with some foresight and collaboration with your loved ones, that you could get pretty close to this ideal holiday season. And so I want you to have this information to use along the way to help you to decide how you can make some of this happen. And you never know, each day or year you might get a little bit closer to your ideal. It's difficult sometimes when we have a lot of people to work with in our family systems, but it's definitely possible. So spend some time in like a little quiet space like meditation, or just sit with your notepad and consider what would be your ideal holiday season, and take some notes on that. I want you to consider to start to simplify. I know we hear words like this and phrases like this a lot. And it's easy to just sort of throw these kinds of things out to the world like, oh, keep it simple. And although I do believe it's true, sometimes it's not always easy to embrace it. But there are things that we can do to simplify the holiday season in ways that maybe we never thought of before. So, which parts of the past couple holiday seasons maybe were just particularly overwhelming for you? Like, if you were to consider last year, maybe the year before that, or many years before that, and you consider the whole holiday season, which parts were the hardest and most stressful for you? Which things caused you to have negative experiences? Are there some things that can be eliminated? Or if not, can you help? If they can't be eliminated, can you get some help in doing them? This could mean doing things like buying the desserts from the local grocery store bakery versus making all the desserts. Like maybe you're in charge of pies or cookies. So you could find like a really nice bakery in your area and purchase them instead of spending the time to make them. Or maybe you use like dollar store gift bags instead of wrapping all the presents because it's easier to just throw things in and you don't need a box and all that. Or maybe you start considering using experiences as gifts. So you could offer things like taking a trip with your family instead of all of the presents. Or you could ask grandparents to give your family a membership to like the science center or the zoo or an art museum versus all of the presents, to reduce the overwhelm of the things you're going to be bringing back into your home. Or maybe it's just simply saying you're going to do a little coupon book for your friend or your family member for different experiences that you know she will love. Like, let's meet for a Starbucks, or you're going to take her to her favorite display at a museum, or you owe her, one walk on the local trail. I'm just making this up as I go, but I think you get the idea. Coming up with the opportunities to share experiences with people can be wonderful as gifts when we just personalize it a little. So be willing to consider simpler options for things that come up that in the past have been really overwhelming for you. Say no to things that you really don't want to do, or you don't have time for. So whenever someone asks you for something or invites you to an event, I want you to really slow down your response time by using a catchphrase every single time. What is the catchphrase? So this is like just a statement that you come up with that's comfortable for you. Maybe you already have one that you use every single time you get a request, and it kind of slows down the whole process, buys you some time to think, and then you can circle back and and respond. So it could be something like, I'm not sure if I'm available. Let me check my schedule and I'll get back to you. Or let me check with my husband and I'll let you know. you might already have something else. I mean, there's probably a bunch of different ways to phrase that, but I think you get the idea. You're basically letting them know that you heard what they said. You appreciate their invite or their request, and you're gonna check in, or you're gonna check your, maybe it's a budgetary issue. You can say, let me check in with my, where my resources are financially, and I'll let you know if I can do that. Because this always lets the person know that they've been heard, and it lets them know that, and that they've been understood. And it also doesn't offer a commitment. So you've slowed it down. Even if you do know the answer already, you can still say something like this just to get used to doing it, and used to like other people waiting for an answer. Sometimes people have trouble with this because they'll stand there and kind of stare at you with those eyes, like, why aren't you giving me an answer? Or I can't believe you would say you have to check your calendar for this. But really, when we're respecting and honoring ourselves enough to say these kinds of things, it's going to lead to a much more peaceful life for you, as well as the building of that confidence that we were talking about. I also really want to challenge you to see if these things that you're asked to do or buy or participate in fit into that ideal holiday plan. So, that ideal holiday plan that we talked about first, everything you do from there, I want you to be measuring that against your ideal plan. So if somebody's asking you to participate in this event or this party or come to, this outing or spend money on this thing, check in with yourself to see if that fits into your ideal plan. The other question that I love to ask that really helps a lot is, what am I doing this for? Really check in with yourself to see, is it for me? Is it for my kids? Is it to get acceptance? Is it so I don't have a conflict? Is it so I feel loved by others? Is it so that I look good? Check in to just make sure, like, what am I doing this for? And that can give you a lot of feedback. When you do this, it also prevents you from leading others on with a maybe. Because sometimes when we drop in, like, oh, yeah, maybe I'll be able to do that. Or, oh, yeah, we should meet for lunch sometime, things like that. You have to backtrack because people take that stuff seriously sometimes. And then when you were just dropping it in as kind of like a blow off comment, somebody might have taken that really seriously. And now you're going to have to circle back or say no eventually, which could get awkward depending on the person. So I want you to practice with using those phrases, those catchphrases, every time you are given a request. I want you to be as specific as possible when you're creating these boundaries, when you're talking to family and friends about this holiday season. Be honest about exactly what you want and don't want. So, for example, if you don't want to be peppered with questions about your love life, for example, or maybe lack thereof, or you're planning on attending an event, but you only will be staying for maybe like an hour or two, you need to let them know. So let your family members and friends know ahead of time. I really don't want to talk about my dating life. It's just something that makes me feel uncomfortable to share about. And so I'd appreciate it if you don't bring it up. That's very easy to do right from the start so that when you get to that place, you're not peppered with those questions that make you feel awkward and then maybe even eventually make you angry or sad and kind of put a damper on the whole experience. So this is a good opportunity to really focus on your own feelings and use words to express them. Like, I feel sad when you consistently put down my choice to do that blank. Or I feel frustrated when you aren't able to accept my answers. Or it makes me uncomfortable when you say or do blank. And then you can explain what that is, but using only the facts about that and not pointing any fingers at that person. And if you find yourself in a situation that you are uncomfortable with the way someone's treating you or speaking to you, you need to speak up. Of course, this can be a little uncomfortable at first because it requires you to speak up truly in the moment, right? Ideally. And it's new. So, for example, you could be hanging out with family and someone says, don't ask her to do that. She always messes it up. You want to look them right in the face and say, wow, that was hurtful. Or maybe your mom's always criticizing your clothes or your hair, and you can use the same phrase like, that's not very nice. Or you can say, I'm really happy with this outfit. Thanks for noticing. You could get snarky a little bit, but without being hurtful. The point really is to let them know that you heard what they said and you didn't like it. And you also really want to shut that down. And there's not much room for the conversation to go anywhere when you do it this way, right? So another example is if you're speaking with someone and things tend to get very negative with that person, or maybe they're overly political or they're just maudlin, but there is kind of an obligation for you to speak with them. Like maybe it's a grandparent or a friend, a family friend, or someone that's kind of important to your family. You know, I would suggest that you let them know by redirecting and then changing the subject that you don't want to talk or hear about these things, right? And if they don't take the bait, you can take it one step further by saying, you're speaking really negatively, and I don't want that kind of energy in my life. So I'm going to have to end the conversation for now. Or maybe it sounds like you're in a bad space right now. It's time for me to go. It sends the signal to them that you aren't going to allow this type of conversation. And hopefully, with time, they'll kind of get the message and then the behavior will stop. But even if it doesn't, you're going to be protecting your heart and your energy. Know your financial limits up front. So this is obviously a big topic around this time of year, and it's something that I think is everyone's aware of it, but nobody really talks about it or does anything about it, which I think is a shame because we know there's easy ways for us to do this early on with our families or even just with ourselves, and to still make things really joyous and fun. So we live in a really materialistic society. We're very focused on things and gifts and money. And I think, and sometimes, it's particularly if you're having a financial struggle, the pressure gets put on for real, and then it takes away the joy that really should be a part of gift giving and sharing time and space, which is really a shame, right? So this really ramps up our materialistic nature and our sense of obligation in buying gifts for literally everyone sometimes, right? So I want you to go back to that ideal holiday season and consider it, that one that you spent time dreaming up. How do gifts or financial obligations fit into that ideal holiday plan for you? Every family is different, right? And this is something that's very personal, and it's private, and only you are the one that needs to know what's going on unless you want to include other people in it. But what's important is that you do know what it is that you want and what it is that you don't want, and then that you stick to it. You have to know your limits. Have this discussion with your partner and your children and your extended family. Be honest. What would you like to do? This is really going to help reduce the feeling of being pressured or obligated into buying things or doing things that you don't want to do. So, for example, if gifts are important to you or you really do want to share your love and your energy in that way, just set some limits for yourself. Set a budget up ahead of time. If you haven't already started your shopping, this is a great opportunity to do that. It's a very simple. I personally use an Excel spreadsheet. It's not fancy. I don't really know how to use Excel. It's a spreadsheet that just has everybody's name on it. It has their budget amount, and then I put the gifts next to it, how much each thing was, and then I add them up until I get to the number that was their budget. And then I use a green highlight when they're all done. So whatever it is for you, you could write it on a pad, whatever you need to do, but it's harmful to you, and it creates mistrust in yourself when you say one thing and do another. So if you say you want to save money this Christmas, or you say you don't want to overspend, or you say you're going to be less materialistic, and then you find yourself on Amazon every single day, or you're out in the mall doing all the shopping, you're not living in alignment with what you're saying. And so your brain is going to get confused and not trust what you say. And it's going to destroy your confidence and your esteem. And it's also going to leave your checkbook feeling a little bit um, empty. And that's going to create more stress for you that's going to be lasting beyond the holiday season. So know your financial limits up front. Consider them. Consider that against your ideal holiday season and what that's supposed to look like for you. And then communicate that up front. And if you're doing something different, like if every year there's always been an exorbitant amount of gifts and it's been crazy and you want to scale back, communicate that up front with your people. It doesn't have to be deeply personal. You don't have to go into the whys of it. You don't have to say, oh, we've come into a hard time. You don't have to do any of that. You just have to say, this year I've decided, or if you have a partner or family, we've decided we're going to do this instead. This year we've decided we're going to take our family on a trip instead of buying gifts. This year we've decided we're just going to buy one gift for each person. Or this year we've decided we're going to draw names and each person is going to buy one thing for that person and that's all they're going to buy. However it looks for you and your family, but just know what your financial limits are. How does that fit into your ideal holiday season? And then communicate that to your people. Because what you don't want is something weird or uncomfortable or comments to come. And obviously that wouldn't be your fault. It's their stuff if somebody does that, but it still would be uncomfortable for you in the moment. So the way to avoid that is to just communicate up front. Make sure that you're flexible and calm. This couldn't be more appropriate for this time of year because plans change all the time, right? The best laid plans are bound to change and the unexpected will happen, right? One of your kids might get sick. Your family member is staying longer than you thought. You forgot a critical food item. The weather's bad. It's important to remember that most things are out of our control, but our responses to them are not. So keep an open mind. If you've done this work that I've talked about up front in communicating specific concerns and needs, you can always then circle back to them, repeating what you have already said and reiterating the plan this year, right? Because sometimes people don't get it on the first try. We have to be willing to understand that, especially if we're implementing things that are new. Sometimes the people in our life are not going to like that, right? Because a lot of times people don't like when we change things or we put in place boundaries, right? So we have to stay calm when we're dealing with the challenges that arise during the holidays. We have to use our breath work. We have to use some really good essential oils. There's an incredible amount of emotional support oils, things like valor, lavender, bergamot, cedarwood, all the amazing essential oils that you can blend together, keep in a roller bottle in your purse and use them all day long. If you want to chat more about it, I'm happy to do that anytime. Don't be afraid to ask for some time alone or retreat to your bedroom or your bathroom or wherever you have a quiet space. If you've got a lot of people in your home, or even if you're just at a party, just if you need a minute, just step outside or step into a quiet space and just give yourself 5 minutes, focus on your breath, ground yourself in the room, looking around, noticing the things you can see and hear and touch until you begin to calm yourself down. We all need a quick respite sometimes. Be specific in your requests of others and not passive aggressive, right? So instead of kind of stomping around saying, this place is a disaster, no one ever cleans up, assign some tasks to people. Everyone in the area can pick up things. Everyone in your home can clean dishes. Everyone in your home can feed dogs and whatever else needs to be done. Everyone can do their part, but most of the time people aren't going to take the initiative to do that. So if you're the person that's sort of in charge of your household, assign some tasks to people versus kind of passive aggressively putting out statements that because you're angry, because you're doing it all by yourself, and you shouldn't do it all by yourself. But a lot of times people without direction, they don't know what to do. And be cautious not to take things personally, right? So remembering that everyone is walking through life in their own pain. And it's important for us to have compassion and empathy during this time because other people are having stress and overwhelm during the holidays too. Now, it's not your fault or your responsibility to manage that, but it is nice to recognize it and to extend some grace when it comes to other people's behavior. It doesn't mean that you don't speak up for yourself. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't leave if that's appropriate. But we also just need to know that compassion and empathy can go a long way as well. All right, so real quick, when setting the boundaries, make sure you know the expectations of others and what you expect for yourself. So we've talked about this a little bit. When you are going through this holiday season, you probably know what some of the people in your life expect from you. They expect you to be at Christmas Eve service with them. They expect you to come to Thanksgiving and stay all day. They expect you to stay for 3 days. I mean, whatever it is that you generally know are the expectations, and then also what are yours, and that ties into that ideal holiday season. So understanding what your ideal holiday season is going to help you to manage that with other people's expectations. But when you layer on communicating what your tolerances are and what your needs are, it's going to help you a lot to have that joy and peace. So I want you to make sure you're as specific as possible when you're communicating, really speaking your truth, saying exactly what it is that you need. You don't have to get into the why. You don't have to get personal. You just need to specifically say, I don't want to talk about this topic while we're at Christmas, or we're going to come to your party, but we're only going to stay an hour. Make sure that you're really considering your personal, financial, and time boundaries, because each one of those areas is going to help you to have the perfect holiday package when it comes to having that peace and serenity this season. And also be prepared to be more assertive when necessary. Oftentimes people don't get it the first time, and we have to be willing to extend grace on that, and then give them compassion when necessary. So I hope all of this has been helpful for you and it makes sense. Those 6 things that I just listed off for you are some great opportunities for you to take control of this holiday season in a way that you never have before. If this is a time for you that's extremely stressful and overwhelming, we can do some very basic things to learn how to speak up for ourselves in a way that's very honoring and respecting to ourselves, so that we can build that confidence, that esteem, and trust in ourselves. That's literally how we do it, because our brains understands that when we consistently do the things that we say we're going to do over time, it can trust us. So if you consistently do speak up to people who are speaking negatively to you or are criticizing, if you consistently do that, your brain gets the message that, oh, Shelby said she wasn't going to accept that kind of criticism from people anymore. And she really means it, because every time that happens, she speaks up for herself. Right? So time, financial, and personal boundaries and emotional boundaries are really important during this time of year. I can't stress it enough. If you need to go back and rewatch what we talked about, it might be helpful to really absorb it. Consider that ideal holiday season, write it down, map it out. What does it look like? Create a vision board, journal about it, whatever you need to do. But what does it look like for you and your family? And sometimes we do have to take one for the team, right? Sometimes we have to go visit grandma in the nursing home when we really don't want to. Sometimes we have to go to the in-laws who live, 2 hours away, and it's not ideal, but it's something we have to take for the team. And so we all have those things in our life too that are kind of obligatory, but we can finesse them in a way that makes it work for us. And then sometimes we don't do them. And if this is a year where you decide you're not going to do some of those things, let it be okay. Let that be okay. But what you have to do is communicate honestly and openly from the very start, so that it's out in the open. Everybody knows what's happening, and then you can go on. They don't have to like it. Okay. Just because you want that doesn't mean a lot of other people want that too. And there might be hurt feelings. There might be anger. And that's not for you. As long as you've been respectful the whole time and not critical, that's not your issue. That's a them issue. So you can go on with your life knowing you've made the decision that's best for you. So creating healthy boundaries for the holiday is an incredibly awesome way to build peace and serenity and joy in your life during this time. I hope this has been helpful. If you want to do more work on boundaries, you can check out the Creating Healthy Boundaries course. And it's pretty awesome. It's really helpful. It's helped a lot of women take control of their lives in a new way. If you have any questions, make sure you leave them below and I will address them as soon as I can, or you can shoot me an email or send me a DM. I hope you have a fantastic holiday season and I will be seeing you guys in the group.